to do our King's declarations. These are just some affirmation statements that we want to say about ourselves, and sometimes they deal with what we're going to experience today. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. I
am
ready to receive information.
ready to receive information.
I am ready for revelation.
Ready for revelation.
I
am
ready for a revolution.
ready for revolution.
I
am
ready to reign.
ready to reign.
So are we ready? All right, thank you guys. You may be seated. You may be seated. So as we said, Dr. Banks is right now. He was deployed last weekend to the beach. This time, the poor guy had to go to Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, the God is just working him. Sending him to all these exotic places. I mean, who wants to do that, right? But he has a full schedule packed, and as you know, that he's been to Trinidad before, a couple of times before, and it was just impressed upon his heart that the things the seeds that he had planted there just weren't growing as they were, because there was just not a person in place to water and rain over the seeds. And so he's going back to Trinidad, kind of in the revival process, to revive those dry bones, revive that dormant seed. And so as you can see, his schedule is packed. He's not on vacation. He's not just laying around with his feet up and being fanned with palm trees. He's actually he's probably busier there than he would be if he was here. So you guys please continue to keep him covered. Ministry can be very taxing, and so that each day as he pours out, that God pours back into his spirit and just revives him and refreshes him, that he can be prepared for the next day. And we just speak safety over the whole trip. I think the islands, you have to take a boat from one island to the next. So, even though he's there, he still has to travel. So Lady Donna has been really great about sending out the prayer requests and things like that. I want to take a minute to, everybody look toward the back to Big Ben Banks.
All right.
And we want to just say thank you for being ready to come. Wayne is not here. He's on assignment in Nashville with PTA. Lady Nisi and Carlos are not here. And so even though Wayne did like a mini training with us on how to work the sound, apparently we really weren't taking it in. And so Lady Sylvia, text Ben, and he sacrificed. He came on out. So I do appreciate your sacrifice, Ben. So everybody give Ben a big round of applause. Thank you, Ben. For praise and worship, he's like, I have no clue what songs. I said, I don't know. I'm going to trust you. So we thank you too for being our lead for praise and worship also. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I say thank you.
Yes.
So let's talk about how Kings process Kingdom Downloads. You guys should have your worksheets there, your handouts, and hopefully I'm going to go slow enough that you can fill that in. I know sometimes I can kind of get ahead of myself and go too fast. So if I'm going too fast, somebody just say slow down, maybe Lord, slow down. So we talked about this, how kings receive information. The first thing is you get the information, and if it's information, it belongs to you, correct? It impacts you. And once you get the information, you want to press forward to a revelation on what that information means to you. How does it connect to your life and what it is God has for you? After the revelation, we need to press and say, okay, God, how do we take this information? And so, we understand what it means, but now how can we create a revolution where now it's impacting someone else? And once we understand what that revolution looks like, then we are ready to reign. We are ready to dominate in whatever it is that God would have us to do with that particular piece of information. So this is the process of how, every Sunday when you're coming, or anytime you hear a message from anyone, whether it's, here at Empowerment or you're someplace else, this should be the process as a king as to what you're doing. You get the information, you pray for the revelation, you understand how to make it into a revolution, and then you take it out into the world with that revolution, and you reign with it. You reign with it. So let's talk about the Bible as information. I know we look at, the Bible is our constitution. The Bible is the holy word of God. And I agree with all that. And I also want you to see the Bible as a source of information. This is where this is where we get our information. The Bible has information about our past. When we read, Genesis all the way up to right before you get to Revelation, it's all about what happened in the past, things that have already taken place. And anytime we want to know what our history as children of God, as kings, as ambassadors, our history is contained in the Bible. But the Bible is also a record or a source for our future. That we can look at the prophecies in the Bible, the things that God says, these things are to come. When we look at the book of Revelations, that's a to come. And so the Bible is a source where God records our future. And it's amazing that God can record something for us that has yet to happen. But he does that to give us hope. He says that, I know the thoughts that I have for you, to give you a hope and a future. But not only that, the Bible is a source of wisdom on how we can apply that knowledge to anything that we are going through today. We talked back in breakfast that when it comes to parenting and leading with our families, that the Bible is a source of wisdom. And so it's amazing that it's the only history book that I know of that gives you information about your past. It gives you information about your future, and it gives you information about how to apply that wisdom today. I don't know of any other history book that does that. And I don't know everything, and if you know of another book that does that, hey, please let me know. But as far as I know, it's the Bible.
Yes.
It's a source of information, but it can't just stay information. We have to turn it into revelation, and then we have to process it into revolution, and we have to use that information to be ready to reign. So let's talk about once again, I keep with this idea of the Bible as information. And I want to talk about a piece of our history, and I'm going to use Ezekiel. We're going to be pretty much in Ezekiel 37, 1 through 11. And most of us know the story about Ezekiel in the valley of dry bones, so we're not going to read it line for line. But this is a very popular scripture for preachers to preach when they're doing revivals. A lot of revivals you go to, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go to Ezekiel 37, 1 through 11. And Dr. Banks, how Dr. Banks feel about that whole reviving dry bones. We're supposed to be living stones, right? You keep dying. We're supposed to be kings. And so, Dr. Banks looks at this in a little bit of a different way that, you keep dying. You keep tolerating that. But we're just going to do just a quick recap of what has taken place through this. Now, I'm going to give you some backstory. This is where the children of Israel had gone into Babylonian exile. And Ezekiel was taken away. He was one of they captured him and had taken him away. And so he's actually, I don't say a prisoner or what they really call him, but they were all exiled into Babylonia. Somebody was always taking over, the children of God. And there was a reason for that. We'll talk about that. But of course, that Ezekiel had a vision where God took him down to this valley, and this valley was full of dry bones. And God asked Ezekiel, son of God, can these bones live? And Ezekiel was like, I don't know, God, you know. And so God was like, well, okay, yeah, so you're right, I do know. And so God told Ezekiel to prophesy over the bones and say, he wanted the bones, he wanted these dry bones to somehow hear the word of the Lord. And tell them that God's going to put breath in you, I'm going to put sinews on you, make your flesh grow back, cover you with skin and breath, and you're going to come alive. And you're going to do this so that you will know I am the Lord. Because they had gotten into a state of rebellion where they were rejecting the Lord, got themselves into a state where the Babylonians captured them. And so now this was a vision that Ezekiel was having. So it wasn't real dry bones. It was the vision that represented the people of God. And so Ezekiel did what he said. And he prophesied. All of a sudden, there was this noise. The bones were rattling and shaking and coming together and things like that. And the flesh and the skin grew on them. And so everything was together, but still there was no breath in them. So even though everything was put together, they still weren't really alive. They looked put together, but there was no life in them. And so God says, okay, Ezekiel, I need you to prophesy to the breath, and you tell the breath to come into these dry bones. And he says, and come and breathe on these slain. And then once the breath came into God, they stood up on their feet. And once again, this is still a vision. This is not something that is actually happening. It's just a vision that God has given Ezekiel. And they stood up on their feet, and they became an exceedingly great army. And then God explained to Ezekiel what the vision meant. He said, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Not 99.9%, but the whole house of Israel. And they say, our bones are dried up, and our hope has perished, and we are completely cut off. And so God was telling Ezekiel that this is what the people are feeling, because once again, they've been carried away into captivity. The temple was destroyed. They were taken away from their homeland. And so this is just how they felt. They felt cut off from God, cut off from their faith, because for them, to be in the temple was a necessary thing as a part of their faith. And so they couldn't go to the temple. Then they felt as though they couldn't get to God because, Jesus hadn't came yet and God's Spirit wasn't yet in everybody. And so the temple was very important to them. And even today, some people feel as though they have to go to church to get the breakthrough. I can't wait for Sunday to get my breakthrough, as if breakthroughs are only passed out on Sundays at church. But this is the mentality that they had, but they couldn't go because of their rebellion and their disobedience. They had been taken into captivity. And this is how they felt. And God was telling Ezekiel that basically tell the people that even I know you feeling cut off. I know your hope has perished. I know you're feeling dried up. But God says, tell the people that there's going to come a day when we're going to raise you up again. And I'm going to put everything back together. Not only that, I'm going to breathe life into you. And if we continue to read our history in the book, you can see where God was true to his promises. That's our biblical history. But now I'm going to give you a piece of world history, and you're going to see how it all connects. How many of you know what these are a picture of? Lady Sylvia, you know? Masada. How many of you know what Masada is? Have you ever heard of the phrase Masada, the word Masada? Lady Sylvia, of course. Brady, I knew.
I'm going to say it's in Ethiopian.
Masada in Hebrew basically translates to the word fortress. So anytime you see the word fortress in the Old Testament, you will see a form of the word Masada, which means fortress. Well, what does that got to do with us, Lady Lorvari? This is not a history class. Yes, it is, because history matters. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Masada, and then I'm going to tell you why it's important for us to know about Masada. Now, you guys see that neat little timeline down there, and I left some blanks, so you guys got to really pay attention to get the information about Masada. So we're going to start at 37 BC. Masada was there before then, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, it belonged to the Jewish people, but there was a time when it was taken over. And so we're going to go to Masada in 37 BC. So this is before Christ and all this stuff. And so Herod, as he was fleeing the Romans, and you need to read about that, but he was fleeing the Romans, he fortified Masada. Over the course of years, he built up the place. It was just a massive place. And so he, had laborers and things like that, and they built rooms and storage. They built these big, what was called cisterns. And we might think of a cistern like there's like a little water thing, but cisterns at Masada, these were like almost big rooms where they would collect rainwater and things like that. And so he spent those years fortifying Masada. In 66 AD, okay, this was after Christ was born, so we're talking about during that period, that there was a Jewish revolt, okay? And there was a Jewish sect called the Sakari, okay? And these were like, bad. When I say bad, I mean like they were like Jewish warriors, and they were called the Sakari because their choice of weapon was the sickle. And so they were really for God, and they were like a step above zealots, almost. But basically, they went to Masada, and there was a revolt, and they took it over from Herod. It was a lot of carnage in the process. When you say a Jewish revolt, they killed everybody that wasn't supposed to be there except them. Okay? So this is what's happening at Masada. So there was a Jewish revolt. But in 73 AD, after the Jewish Sakari had made their way, there was about maybe 1,000 of them there. There was a siege by the Romans again. They were going to come back, and they wanted to take Masada back. And so about 8,000 to 10,000 Roman soldiers spent about 8 months surrounding Masada, trying to get in. But remember, it was a big fortress, so they just couldn't just walk up and get into Masada. And so they performed a siege. And if you know anything about sieges during that time, that means that the enemy would encamp around where you were, and you couldn't go out. And so basically, sieges were successful because eventually you run out of food, you run out of water, and things like that. But Masada was so massive, and remember they had these big water cisterns that they had water for months. They say that the Jewish, if you read anything about the works of Josephus, that the Jewish people would hang out their laundry just to let the Romans know we got water for days, man. And every time it rained, we get more water. So they weren't really concerned about running out of water or running out of food. Herod had just really built up Masada with massive storehouses of foods of all types that they probably could have lasted for years. Okay, but what the Romans did, they figured out they couldn't get into Masada. So over this course of 8 months, they built a ramp to get up over the top of Masada. And so, of course, the Jews are seeing this like, we didn't think they were going to do that. And so, now you can kind of think how they feel it. They're seeing this ramp being built, and the Romans are getting closer and closer and closer to entering this fortress. And so the almost 1,000 Jews who were in there are probably starting to get a little bit worried. I would. Because I'm like, okay, it's 10,000 of them and 1,000 of us. So what are we going to do? So they had a bright idea. They did not want to fall into the hands of the Romans. So they said, well, what we going to do? We just going to kill ourselves. That was their idea, that there's a siege going on out there. If the Romans come in, they're probably, we don't know what they're going to do to us. They're probably going to torture us or whatever, make us slaves. And so they made a pact amongst themselves that we just going to kill ourselves before the Romans can kill us. And so that's what they did. They burned everything within Masada, all the buildings and things like that. And then men, women, children were killed. Either they killed themselves or someone, fathers killed families and then killed themselves. But it was basically a mass suicide. That was their bright idea on how to avoid the siege, was to, we just out of here. We're not gonna, we just out of here. So that's what they did. And so when the Romans did finally get in, they were ready to fight. And what they found was a bunch of burning buildings and a lot of dead bodies. A lot of dead bodies. But in the midst of all that carnage, there were 7 survivors. There were 7 survivors. And now, I don't know if these were survivors on purpose, that somebody was left to tell the story, or these are 7 people that said, no, I ain't going out like that. I'm not sure. It doesn't really say what that rationale was. But they were found in, I told you about the cisterns, and so they were found at one of these big water wells. And you know who the survivors were? 2 women and 5 children. 2 women and 5 children were left out of all of this carnage to tell the story, to give hope that everybody is not dead. We're still here, guys. We're still here. So there was 7 survivors, 2 women and 5 children. I read that. I was like, oh, 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And I don't know if those 2 are connected. That's just how my mind works. So I'm not gonna, make up some connection there. So this was it. This was with that. So now let's go to 1955. That a group of archaeologists went to excavate the site at Masada. Took them 10 years to do it. And what they found some amazing things in this excavation of Masada. They found a lot of rooms, and the rooms had a lot of different scrolls from the Old Testament and things like that. And that wasn't really unusual. And they said that these rooms were typical places where you would expect to find the scrolls that didn't get burned or didn't get disintegrated by just the air. And so they found just scrolls in different rooms, and that was nothing unusual. But here's an unusual thing, that in this one room, as they were digging and excavating, they found some scrolls that seemed like they were purposely buried there to protect them from the fire, to protect them from the elements. And so before these people committed suicide, they took these scrolls. They found that these words were important enough that whoever found these words on these scrolls, they wanted to make sure that they understood that these words were important. Do you know what was on some of those scrolls? It was like it was 2 passages. One was from Psalm. Whoa. The passage was Ezekiel 37, 1 through 11, about the dry bones.
Wow.
This was the scroll that these people who knew that they were going to die, but to give the people hope who found this, they said, I want you to know that God says, I'm going to raise you up. I'm going to revive you, and I want you to take hope. So this was in 1955. So back in 73 AD, they were already thinking about those who in 1955 who were going to need hope. They died having hope that even though they may not see the promise right then and there, that the promise was still yet for an appointed time. And they wanted to make sure whoever found it, they knew someone was going to find it. They didn't know how, but they just knew, hey, when someone finds them, I want them to have hope. And so this was the most amazing thing for the excavator. They were just excited that the fact that a passage about God reviving dry bones was found during the excavation. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Masada. Masada in 1966 was then opened up as a tourist attraction. Something that had long been buried, burned, and not even thought about. In 1966, after the excavation, they opened it up. And it's a major tourist attraction for Jerusalem. Major. And they've built cable cars that takes millions of people a year up to the heights of Masada, and they can read about the history of Masada. They can read the book or the passage in Ezekiel about God reviving the dry bones and God raising up their hope and becoming that exceeding great army. And it's a major tourist attraction. People go to, they pay now to go to Masada. And here's the great thing, God at the very end, he says, I'm going to raise you up to be an exceedingly great army. The Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, when they go to swear in, they march up into the mounts of Masada. This exceedingly great army now marches up to Masada, and upon their swearing in for the defense of Israel, they swear in, and their rising call is Masada will not fall again. This is just information that the Bible gives us information about our past, and you see how it connects, and it gave us hope for the future. But now our job is, what does that mean for us today? What is the revelation? How do we make that connection between the Valley of Dry Bones and Masada? And I was asking God, okay, well, first of all, why are you having me research Masada? I mean, I love history, but okay, Masada it is. And so how do we make this connection? What does that mean for us today? Because now I've given you information, and I could stop here, and you guys are probably really totally impressed. If I stop here and say, oh, I'm going to go Google about this Masada thing. But we have to do more than just get information. So let's talk about those slain. Now in Ezekiel, in the book of Ezekiel, God says these are the ones who have been slain. We want you to breathe on those who were slain. Slain means, you were killed, you were murdered, you were massacred, and things like that. Even though and he said that, that their hopes and their dreams and their ideals had perished. There are some times when we may feel like we've been slain in some sense, and our hopes and our ideals and our dreams have perished. And we may feel like the children of Israel, that we feel cut off because some things are happening around us. We may feel like we're being sieged on every hand. And how do we handle that? There was a loss of hope in Ezekiel. There was a loss of hope. And at Masada, I would say that for 960 people to agree to commit mass suicide, that there was a loss of hope. And that's usually what brings on, even in our day and age, when someone commits suicide, it usually deals with life is a siege around them. And they see no hope in the process. And so they make that decision. And I'm not doing a message about suicide and all this. That's for another time. But it's about a loss of hope. And so the people at Masada, they chose suicide instead of fighting. That instead of dealing with the siege and saying, okay, you know what? I trust God. I'm going to let God deal with it. They just gave up and they committed suicide. So really, they really weren't slain. They killed themselves to avoid the pressure. They killed themselves to avoid the pain. They killed themselves to avoid the unknown because they didn't know what the Romans were going to do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not saying that they were right. I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm just saying this is what they did. You make your own judgment on that. But I'm just giving you a little bit of information and a little bit of revelation about how it all connects. That instead of fighting, they gave up. Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean for us? That our first step in any revival of our hopes, of our dreams, of our ideals, is that we have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility. Just like the children of Israel with the Valley of Dry Bones, they were taken away into Babylonian captivity. It was because of something they did. God allowed them to be carried away because of their own actions. The people at Masada, the Romans didn't kill them. They made the choice. And so we have to understand when it comes to our hopes, when it comes to our dreams, when it comes to our ideals, can't nobody kill nothing in us but us. Yes. Nobody can kill our dreams. Nobody can kill our ideals. We make the choice. And I know it's easy to say, well, my mama did this, my daddy didn't do this, my coworker, my ex-husband, my pastor, the lady next door, the dog. It's easy to blame and point the finger at everyone else. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that those things didn't happen. Let's say, your daddy abandoned you. And so that's why you didn't do. And you say, well, I didn't have a father in my life, so that's why I do this, this, and this. It's true. You didn't have a father in your life. That's the truth. But it's a lie that it's the reason that you're doing what you're doing. It's a personal choice. And so we all have to understand that when it comes to our hopes and our dreams and our ideals, we have to stop pointing the finger at it happened because somebody did this. You become an eternal victim. Every time you say that the reason your life is like it is was because somebody else did this. And so this is what I want you to do, is that you can acknowledge the siege. That yes, these bad things happened. My mama was horrible. My daddy was horrible. My ex-husband was horrible. My wife ran off with the dog. And all this stuff. That those things are true. Acknowledge the siege. But you've got to admit to the suicide. You've got to admit, but I killed my own dreams. I allowed the siege on the outside to frighten me enough that I said, instead of fighting, I don't want to deal with it. I don't know what's going to happen. And so when someone asks you, well, how come this? And the first thing that comes out of your mouth is that somebody else did something. You are an eternal victim. All right. And sometimes it's hard to take responsibility for the bad things in your life. It's hard to own up to, this is a choice that I made. I remember one of my friends, she said she went to something at Harvard, and it's a kind of workshop or something. And she's a single parent, and so she was talking to a lady, and the lady was talking with her, and so she shared that she's a single mom, and she goes, oh well, did your husband die? And she's like, no. She says, well, did you get a divorce? And she's like, no. She's like, oh, so you did this to yourself. And she said initially she got offended, but then she had to realize, this was a choice that I made. And that kind of took the wind out of her sails, because, I had this baby and the daddy's not doing anything. It has nothing to do with it. That's the siege stuff. The siege is what happens on the outside. The suicide is an eternal thought process that you go through that says, I'd rather die than fight. I'd rather give up my hopes and dreams and my ideals than to push forward. And then I want to blame it on the siege. It's not the siege. It's not the outside forces that cause you not to move forward. It's the internal and mental decisions you make to commit suicide on your dreams. And I'm not, flinging the word suicide out like, it's a random thing. I know it's a very touchy subject, but that's what the people at Masada did. Instead of fighting, they said, no, we don't want to fight. So what does all this mean, Laura? What's the revelation? Let's make the connection. That out of the 960 people, well, there was 967, out of the almost 1,000 people who died, there were 7 survivors, 2 women and 5 children. In the midst of all this carnage, in the midst of the fire, in the midst of the smoke, in the midst of the siege, in the midst of all these dead bodies and the blood and guts, there were 7 survivors, 2 women and 5 children, who said, I understand the siege, I understand the fight, but I'm not going to kill myself. That as long as I'm living and breathing, there is a chance for me.
Yes.
And you got to understand that you can't just kill your dreams. You can't just kill your ideas. You can't just give up just because things are not going your way.
Yes.
You have got to understand that in the midst of all that carnage, you got to find the survivors, baby. You got to find the dreams and the hopes that are going to still have life in them. So you can say that these are your dry bones, and you can ask God to come and put them back together and breathe on them. You got to find your 2 women and your 5 children amidst all the carnage in your life. When life is on a siege, things are not going right, your finances are funky, your marriage is funky, your kids are funky, your job is funky, everything is acting up. It's a siege, but you got to have some survivors. Everything may not make it. Some dreams may not make it. Some ideas may not make it. But everything can't just die. Because if everything just died, who's going to tell the story of your life? If you kill off everything that you think about, who's going to tell your story? You can't let everything die. You've got to find your 2 women and your 5 children in the midst of all the carnage of your life. Yes, it's a siege, but it doesn't mean you have to die. You've got to ask God, can these bones live? And we're going to reverse the question. You ask God, can these bones live? God says, you know. You know. You've got to find your survivors in the midst of all this carnage. So I said, okay, God, why 2 women and 5 children? That just seems strong. Now, I did say because the women, we bad like that. We're too stubborn to die. If we want to fuss at somebody, why did you let this happen? I don't know. That's my story. That's how I'm going to tell it. We just bad like that.
That's right.
But, and he gave me a revelation about 2 women and 5 children. The 2 women equals the thing that you were doing and you just stopped doing and you blamed it on something else. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to need some examples. And so my most recent example is, many of you know I've gone back to school after a 240-month gap year. 20 years. Hey, it took a long gap. But in the past, when I talked about why I didn't finish my degree, I would always say, well, you know, I was in the middle of my junior year at the University of Maryland. We were in Germany. But because Wayne was in the military and we had to move, it was our time to leave, and we, got stationed someplace else. As a military family, whatever you're in the middle of doing, doesn't matter to Uncle Sam. You just get up and you go. That's just the lifestyle of military wives and children. And so I would always say, well, the reason I didn't finish was because in the middle of my junior year, we had to come back to the States as if there were no schools.
Right.
So we get to North Carolina, and the reason I didn't go back was, well, my kids are teenagers, and I really wanted to kind of be around the house. And, and then, I want to work because, we were trying to pay off some bills. And so I really couldn't go to school when I was in North Carolina because of this. And then the kids got grown and everything, and we went to Utah. I had no children, no grandchildren. And I didn't go to school because, I don't know, I got a really good job, and I liked the job, and I didn't, I really didn't want to, go to school. And I was always something else. And so I started school, and I had this idea that, I really need to go back to school to finish. But I had to take responsibility for the reason why I took that 240-month gap year. It had nothing to do with Wayne being in the military. He was in the military. We did have to leave in the middle of my junior year. I did have teenagers during the time of North Carolina. I did have a great job when I got to Utah. But the reason I didn't finish school was I killed it. I made excuses, and I had to take responsibility for that. So these 2 women and 5, those 2 women deal with the things that you may have been flowing in, and for whatever reason, you just stopped doing it. Now, sometimes you have to discern between, did I just stop or was my season over? And you have to have discernment with that. An example would be I used to be in dance ministry. I used to, be a leader of the women's dance ministry, the children's dance ministry, the flag team, and all that stuff. I loved doing it, but my season for that was over. And God allowed me to stop. So I'm talking about these things where you just gave up. It became too hard. Things happened. And you tried to kill it. But God says it's not dead. It just needs to be revived. And so there, in the midst of all this carnage of dead dreams and ideals, you have those things that you were throwing in, you enjoyed doing it, and sometimes it's not even something major. For me, it's something like making jewelry. I love to make jewelry. I have a whole space set up, and I loved it. And for whatever reason, I could blame everything else. Well, the kids came back home, and now my space is all messed up. I can blame everything. But no, I just stopped doing it. And I can ask God to revive it. And so it doesn't have to be anything major. So you need to start thinking about, what is it, God? These are the things that you say, why don't I still do so-and-so? I used to do this, and I really want to get back into it. You might have a degree in it. You might have a certificate in it. You might, a ministry or a program that you were really flowing in, and the siege in your life happened, and you just stopped doing it. God says there's some survivors in there.
Yes.
And you have to think about, what are those ideals? What are your two women that you were going to pull up out of that carnage, and say, God, can these bones live? And then you have your 5 children. These are the ideals and thoughts that you thought about doing. You may have put them on paper, you may have talked about them, but they were not pursued, they were not fed, they were not cultivated. They are just ideals amidst this carnage of bones. These are your 5 children.
All right, Lord.
Yet.
All right.
And they have names. They have names. We have the quadruplets. The first one is, her name is Iwana. I want to do this one day. I want to do this. I want to do that. So her name is Iwana. The next one is, I shoulda. Now this is, I shoulda did this. I shoulda did that. I shoulda. There are so many things that we say, I shoulda. Okay? The next part of this quadruplet is, I coulda. Well, if this didn't happen, I coulda did this. I coulda did that. I coulda. Her name is I coulda. It's one of your 5 children that you need to deal with. And then I mighta. If that woman hadn't took all my money, I might have been somebody. I might have been a contender. I mighta. Now this last one, we all know this one. This is not part of the quadruplets, but this is maybe one day. You know who maybe one day is? Maybe one day I'll do this. Maybe one day when everything settles down in my life, I'll do this. Maybe one day when the kids are grown. Maybe one day when I find my husband. Maybe one day when I get my credit straight. Maybe one day when I'm feeling better. Maybe one day I'm going to do all these ideals that I dreamed of. Maybe one day I'm going to dust off all this poetry and actually put it into a book. Maybe one day I'm going to tell my story of how I survived the suicide. Maybe one day. And we've got to deal with these 5 children. We, in the midst of all that carnage of ideals and dreams and hope, you have 2 women and 5 children that you need to present up to God and say, can these bones live? So now it's time for a revolution. We've got the information, we got a revelation about what it means, but how do we turn this into a revolution? I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. On the back of your paper, you see your bones. The big bones for the 2 women, 5 bones for the small children. Now, you may not be able to name all of your bones right now, but I need you to come up with at least one bone Give a dog a bone. But at least one bone that you want to say, God, can this bone live? It could be the bone of something that you were already flowing in and you want to get back to in a ministry or something like that. Or it could be an idea that you had that says, you know what, I'm going to offer up this bone on today. So I want you to take just a few minutes and name your bones. And just, make a little bullet point. It could be, ministry. It could be business. It could be whatever. It could be, you can do the women, something you was already flowing in, or you can do the children. Doesn't matter to me, but you're going to offer up a bone to me on today. Just give you a few minutes to think about that. Give me at least one. I know we all got more than one, but we need to revive some bones here today, because in the midst of all that carnage, there's some survivors, and you cannot give up hope. Sometimes we have to admit, yeah, I let some things die, and I can't get back to them. That's okay. But everything didn't die. Everything didn't die. They're just not moving. Because you need God to breathe on it. Yes. Everything didn't die. You didn't kill everything. God will not allow that to happen. Because you have so much inside of you. And if all your hopes and all your dreams die with you, what was the purpose of you even being here? You're like a vapor in the wind. Yes. And God says, I put too much of myself into you for you not to leave a legacy, for you not to leave an impact. And you've got to be willing to offer up those bones. Are we ready to move on? Everybody got at least one bone down? Everybody nod if you got a bone down. Nod your head, I got a bone down. Bone, I got a bone, head bones. So then let's talk about how to revive your dry bones. There is a process to it. Just like in Ezekiel, God didn't just revive it all at once. The bones had to connect to the bones, and then he had to put the sinews on, then he had to put the muscles on, then he had to put the skin and the flesh, and so there was a process. So it's going to take more than just writing the bone on the paper and like, oh, okay, I'm good now. No. It didn't die that easy. It's not going to live. It's not going to be revived that easy. And so the first thing you need to do is understand the revival revolution strategies. Just like in Ezekiel 37, 1 through 3, there was a question that was asked. Can these bones live? You have to ask the question. When you put your bones on the paper, you need to go to God and say, God, is this what I'm supposed to pursue? Can these bones live? Can this ideal survive? Can this dream survive? Can I really get back to doing this? And then you have to wait for his answer. And see, sometimes, here's the thing, we talk about doing what's possible and doing what seems impossible. And sometimes we don't have enough faith to do what seems impossible because we haven't been fruitful in the things that are possible. And so until you perfect doing what's possible, how are you going to have the faith to even ask God for the impossible? And so let's start being fruitful in the things that we were already doing and we let die. And once you begin to get a proficient in that and build up your faith, God says, you're not even fruitful in the stuff that you can do without me.
Oh, Lord.
So why would you expect God you're not doing what he told you to do? You're not doing what he's already given you the power to do, and now you want some supernatural power for what? To let sit and die too? No. You're seemingly impossible. I'm going to buy, I'm going to buy this mansion and hold it for retreats, for book writing retreats. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna hold, book where I'm gonna buy this mansion, and it's gonna have rooms, and people can come, and they can write their books, da, 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 da. Can you do a retreat in Atlanta first? That's possible. But if he can't trust me to hold a retreat somewhere in Georgia, and it's a scary thing, I put my money down on this cabin and only one person who has paid so far, but that's okay. I understand that it's a faith thing. But if he can't trust me to do what's possible, I'm gonna fix my mouth to ask for a mansion, and I won't even go to a cabin. So let's deal with the stuff that God has given you the power to do. Be fruitful in that. And then build up your faith. And that's the seemingly impossible is there for you. But can you revive what's possible first? And you build up your faith. And that's a lot of times why you don't have the faith to believe in the impossible. Because you haven't been fruitful in the things you know you can do. And so it's hard to believe in the impossible when you keep killing the stuff that's possible. So you need to ask the question, God, is this possible? Can these bones live? And once again, God says, you asking me, you know. If I put it in you to do, if I have given you the ideal, if I put it in your mind, I can put it in your hands. If I put it in your hands, I can put it in the earth. Yes. But you still got to ask the question. The next thing you've got to do is you've got to speak life over it. God told Ezekiel, speak to these bones. Tell them what the word of God says. You got to speak life. You got to find the word of God. You got to pray over it. You got to prophesy over your own bones. We wait so much for the pastor or the prophet or the apostle to call us up sometimes, or we want to catch these random prophecies on Facebook. Say, I receive it. But you better learn how to prophesy to your own bones. They belong to you. It's okay for confirmation, but if you don't have it in your mind first, if you haven't spoken over the bones first, anybody else's word is not going to have as much power as the word of God that comes through you. I am no respecter of persons. When Jesus died on the cross, that veil was torn. God put his spirit in each and every one of us, that we have the power to prophesy over our own dry bones. You're good for confirmation, but I don't need your permission to revive my bones. I don't need the pastor's permission. I don't need the bishop's permission. I don't need the apostle's permission. I don't need your mama's permission. These are my bones. Yes. I'm going to talk to my bones. By the Spirit of God that is in me, I'm going to speak to my bones. You deal with your bones. I'm going to deal with my bones. But you got to speak life. You got to speak the word of God. The next thing you got to do is you got to put some skin on them. In that process, God says, I'm going to cause bone to come to bone, and then I'm going to do the skin. You've got to put some skin on them. Those are the plans and preparations that you make. Now understand, when you begin to speak to the bones and things start to come together, there's going to be a noise. In the book of Ezekiel, it says that there was a noise, there was a rattling. And understand, when you make a sound on earth, there's going to be a reciprocal sound in heaven. That when your bones start coming together and your skin starts coming on and things like that, there is going to be a sound. You've got to make a sound on earth, and then you know that you're going to shake up heaven. And understand that when you begin to make a sound, when you begin to speak life over your stuff here on earth, there's going to be some noise on earth from people. All right. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I can't believe you're going to do that. Noise, noise, noise. Understand, just like in Ezekiel, when the bones start coming together, there was a rattling, there was a shaking, there was some noise going on. When you begin to speak to your bones, when you begin to send your sound waves over the earth, there is going to be some noise, there is going to be some rattling, there's going to be some noise in heaven, there's going to be some noise on earth. You better focus on the noise coming from heaven, because the noise on earth is going to distract you. I could have did, well, why are you doing that? Well, if I was you, I wouldn't do this. Let me tell you, sometimes I don't mind being deaf, because I can change my voice. I don't hear nothing you say. You better learn how to shut the noise up on earth so you can hear heaven's sound to give you instruction. But you better understand, when you ask God to start start putting your bones together, you better expect some noise.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And the noise you need to listen to is the noise that comes from heaven.
Yes.
Because that's the frequency of something happening in heaven to manifest itself on the earth. This noise on the earth, people telling you what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, what happened to them, that's just noise.
Right.
That's rattling I don't need to hear. I want thunder.
Yeah.
You rattling, God thunders.
Yes.
And that's the only thing I'm going to be listening for is the thunder of heaven. You can make all the noise you want. I will pull my implants off and they put you on mute. These are my bones.
Yes.
All right.
These are my bones and I'm ready to make some noise.
Yes.
With all of this carnage, all of these things on earth, God said, I've given you a hope and a future. That's the sound that I'm going to listen to.
Right.
These are my bones. God said, speak to your bones.
Yes.
Speak my word to your bones. I have put all of myself in you. All of it. I have put my spirit in you. You know what you should say. God says, any man lack wisdom, what? Let him ask of God. And he will give it to all, liberally without reproach. He says, I know the thoughts I think for you, to give you a hope and a future. That if you ask anything according to my will, I'm going to do it. That's the kind of sound that you want to hear. All the rest of this stuff is just noise, noise, noise. It's just noise. But anytime you're going to do something from God, you need to expect a sound.
Yes.
And every sound ain't good sound, so you need to discern the difference between thunder and rattling. Know the difference. And the last thing you need to do, because in that process with Ezekiel, even though the bones had come together, the skin was on, the flesh was on, the muscles was on, it still wasn't moving. They still weren't coming to life. So the last part of this strategy is you've got to breathe life. You've got to ask God, God, breathe on my bones. Because the word says it's not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, my ruach, says the Lord. Not by Facebook, not by LinkedIn, not by Instagram, not by networking, not by all this reeling and dealing, but it's by my spirit. Those things are resources, yes, but if God hadn't breathed on your bones, you can have as many Facebook ads as you want to, and you are never going to be what God wants you to be because you haven't accessed His spirit. So you need to make sure when you get your bones together that you first of all, you've asked Him, you've spoken the word over, now you said, God, I got it together like you told me to. Now, breathe on my bones so that this plan can live, that this dream can live, this ideal can become something. Because without the breath of God, all you got is skin, bones, and flesh, and you're not going to impact anybody. But it's only when you breathe the word of God, when you ask God, breathe on my bones. And God says, I put my breath in you, you breathe. You breathe on your bones. I am in you and you are in me. My power is in you. Your power is in me. Are you ready to breathe on your bones? That's what it's going to take. It's that you can do all the planning and you want, but if God don't breathe on it, it's just still a pile of bones with skin. And so the final step is God, breathe life into this thing. When you come up with an ideal and you make all your plans on paper, I love to plan. I have little mind maps and bubble maps and squares and all this stuff, folders. But if God don't breathe, it's just dead trees sitting on my desk. But when I say, God, you told me to do this. I've done what you've asked me to do. You told me these bones can live. We put this plan together. I just need your breath. I just need you to breathe life into it so that it becomes an exceedingly great army. And once you put those bones together and you put that plan together and you let God breathe, and then you breathe with God. You don't sit back and have God do all the work. God says, I breathe from heaven and you breathe from earth. And when my breath meets your breath, there ain't nothing but power going on, baby. In the middle of all that breath, are you ready to breathe on your bones? Are you ready for the Spirit of God, the ruach, God, the breath of God, the breath of life to breathe on your dry bones. This is how you revive dry bones. Not by might, not by power. Some may trust in horses, some may trust in chariots. But I will trust in the Lord my God. Some would trust in Facebook, some would trust in LinkedIn, some would trust in networking. You can do all that and still fail.
Yes.
And still fail.
Yes.
Because you need to trust in the breath of God.
That's right. Yes.
And so now you prepare to reign. In Ezekiel 37:10, it says that the bones rose up and they became an exceedingly great army. What does that look like? You know, that terrain means to dominate. That just like with Masada, it's now a tourist attraction. And I said, well, God, what is a tourist attraction? He said, baby, when you begin to reign, people will come to you to see what you have.
Yes.
That your name will be in their mouths, your name will be released in the earth, and people will come looking for you. You will get the email and say, hey, I was thinking about writing a book, and somebody told me I need to contact you. I get that all the time. I'm like, oh, who told you? And they name a person. I ain't never even heard of that person. But somehow my name, because why? I understand how to dominate in what God has called me to do. I don't even give out business cards anymore. When I meet somebody, I tell you what I do. If you want what I have, you ask me for my card. I'm not going to give it to you. You come to me because I have what you want.
Thank you.
I'm a tourist attraction. That's how you dominate. When people start coming to you, yeah, you can advertise and all that, but you don't have to chase anybody down. When God is in it, He will send people to you. Noah didn't have to go get the animals came to him. God said, put them on 2 by 2. He didn't go out, come on, horse, come on, zebra. God sent them. Why? Because He was prepared for rain. Yeah. And He was prepared to reign. So when you are prepared to reign, God will make you a tourist attraction.
Yes.
That people will begin to come to you without all the rigmarole of Facebook ads and all this stuff, all this marketing. That's good stuff. You have to do that. But when God makes you a tourist attraction, He will send the right people to you.
He will.
Do you want to be a tourist attraction?
Yes.
Do you want people to just come and seek you out? Huh? Do you want them to make plans to visit?
All right. Yes.
Is that what you want?
Yes.
Breathe on
Faith,
your bones.
babies.
In the midst of all that kind, in the midst of all the scenes, in the midst of all the things that have died in your life, you've got some survivors. You've got 2 women and you've got 5 children, and you need to figure out, God, can these bones live? And when He tells you yes, you implement the plan, and then you implement the plan, and you say, God, now I need to breathe. I'm waiting for the sound. God, breathe.
Yes.
God says, I'm waiting for your sound. You breathe.
Yeah.
Are you ready to breathe?
Yes.
Hallelujah.
And so now, what I want to do, and we got time, remember, see, I want you to look at that dry bone that you've chosen. Now I want you to think, what does it look like for that bone to dominate in the earth, that it has God's success? What does that bone look like? If it was to dominate like you wanted to dominate, if you could dominate like you want to dominate, what would it look like? If that bone had skin and flesh and sinews and muscles and the breath of God in it, and it was living and moving and breathing and became an exceedingly great army to impact the earth, what does it look like if that bone would dominate? And so we're going to do some accountability here. And I'm not going to force you to expose your bones. I'm not going to force you. But if you want the collective breath of God, the collective breath of God that is in this building right now, my breath, Lady Sylvia's breath, Maya's breath, Sharon's breath, Mama Sandra's breath, Donna's breath, if you want the breath of the collective breath of God to breathe on your bone, I'm going to give you a chance to stand up, introduce your bones, and you say, God, I need some collective breath on this. and then we're gonna hold you accountable. That's why I want to do this, because I want to know what your bone is. Because y'all know when Laura finds out what your bone is, I'm gonna be on you. So I'm just gonna tell you in advance, because you were thinking about standing up, but you don't want the rigmarole of my foot in your butt. Stay seated. Because when you tell me what your bone is, I'm gonna expect some noise.
All right.
I'm not gonna take this off. I'm gonna expect some noise.
All right.
So now, up, Mama Precious.
I'm gonna say that my name
Wait.
is...
I wanna make sure I hear. Is this on, Ben? There we go.
My name is I'm Gonna.
Okay.
The reason I'm Gonna is because I'm an artful person, but I have so much art stuff in my bedroom that I know as an older person, I don't need all this stuff in the floor. And I need God's help to move this. And I'm going to breathe on that to give it to someone else that loves art. That would help them. Because I got a lot of stuff in my room that me as I'm going, it's going to move it. God is going to do this for me. And I'm going to breathe on it, and so is God.
Wait, before y'all know, y'all ready? Look at her. Take a deep breath. Breathe. Now you have the collective breath of God at your disposal.
All right.
Amen. Lady
Thank you,
Sharon.
Lord.
I want you all to hold me accountable. In 2020, I'm going to release my self-help book on crossroads between life and death to help all these people pre-plan their funerals and bereavement committees throughout all these churches to have my information to know what to do. So I'm asking you all to breathe on me and hold me accountable. In 2020, that book is coming out.
All right. Y'all ready? Deep breath. The collective breath of God is at your disposal. Ambassador Gary. Yay. Hallelujah.
You know, you've heard me say this several times, but I've been thinking about, I've been going through basically starting my fourth generation of raising kids. Between the time that I was growing up as a kid, and I've been teaching and raising kids, 2 generations, that's 3, and then in 2 more years, I'll be starting my 4th generation of raising kids. With that said, my goal is maybe one day. I've been talking about writing this book about raising kids for some time now. I need to get on it. And my vision of that is that after writing a book, that a new generation will see or raise their kid according to God's word and not according to man's word.
Yes.
Y'all ready? Inhale.
Ready?
You now have the collective breath of God at your disposal.
So receive it.
Matthew.
I got 2 of them. First one is Janika, my cousin. Her son just passed. Well, it's been a year ago. Her son passed October 4th, 2018. He was 18 years old. Over something stupid. But it was like when I was around my family and stuff like that, it's like we in 2 different worlds. You know, they live in downtown Chattanooga, and I live up in East Vernon, you know. Not to like say I'm better than them, but like I'm in a better situation, and it's like I want to be able to speak to them, but it's like how do I relate? Yeah, we're family, yeah, we love each other, but we in 2 different spaces. So my second one is I wanna. There's a lot of stuff I want to do, but it's really just getting around and doing it.
Ready?
Amen.
The collective breath of God is at your disposal. Anybody else? Regina. Please start. Thank you, Gina. And Corey. we're gonna go ahead and cut off the Facebook Live feed. We thank you guys for joining us. I encourage you, name your bones, send them in to us, and trust us, we will breathe on your bones, even from hundreds and thousands of miles away. Thank you, Facebook.